you wake up feeling like a stranger in your own life. Nothing is exactly wrong, but nothing feels truly right either. There's a quiet disconnection that follows you through your days, like a piece of your soul has gone missing, and you can't name what or why. You look in the mirror and see a face you've worn for years, but deep down something in you whispers, "This isn't all of me." What if the reason you feel lost isn't because you've failed, but because you've been split, fragmented by expectations, buried under masks, and cut off from the deeper self you were meant to become? Carl Jung didn't see this as a breakdown. He saw it as a breakthrough, a signal from the soul urging you to turn inward, to confront what's been hidden, to remember what's been forgotten, and to begin the most important journey of all, the journey back to yourself. There are moments in life when everything around us seems familiar, yet deep inside we feel like strangers to ourselves. We might have a stable job, a family, a social life, and yet there's a quiet emptiness that follows us, a nagging feeling that something essential is missing. This experience is more common than we realize. It doesn't matter whether you're successful or struggling. Many people at some point feel disconnected from their own lives. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and one of the most influential thinkers in the history of psychology, believed that this feeling of being lost is not a flaw, but a signal that the soul is trying to speak. In today's fast-moving world, it's easy to lose touch with our inner selves. From a young age, we're taught to meet expectations, those of our parents, society, teachers, and peers. We build our lives chasing goals that often aren't our own. We become what Jung called collectively programmed. Without realizing it, we start living someone else's story. And over time, this creates a deep divide inside us. One part of us is performing, showing up, smiling, achieving. The other part is silent, buried, and ignored. This split is what Jung referred to as fragmentation of the self. Jung didn't believe that people are born lost. He believed we become lost when we stray too far from our true nature, when we silence our instincts, ignore our emotions, or suppress our desires. A gap starts forming between who we are and who we pretend to be. And in that gap, the sense of confusion and emptiness grows. This isn't something that happens overnight. It builds slowly, in moments when we agree to things we don't believe in, when we stay quiet even though something feels wrong, when we keep showing up to a life that doesn't feel like our own. It becomes a routine, a habit of avoiding ourselves. Jung believed that the psyche reacts to this by sending us signals. Anxiety, depression, boredom, and dissatisfaction aren't just mental health problems. They're the psyche's way of asking us to pay attention. At the root of this lost feeling is a deep spiritual disconnection, not necessarily in a religious sense, but in the sense of being cut off from the deeper parts of ourselves. Jung referred to this as being disconnected from the self, the totality of our being. The self includes not just the conscious parts we know and show, but also the unconscious parts we've never explored. To Jung, the journey of life wasn't just about surviving or succeeding. It was about reconnecting with the self and becoming whole. But in modern life, there's little room for this inner journey. Everything is external. We measure success by how much we earn, how many people follow us, or how busy we are. Inner silence is treated like laziness. Reflection is seen as wasting time. In this constant noise, our inner voice becomes faint. Eventually, we forget how to hear it. We drift from one goal to the next, always chasing, never arriving. And that's when the feeling of being lost becomes overwhelming. Jung believed that we all carry within us a blueprint for wholeness. He called this the process of individuation, a natural unfolding that happens when we listen to the call of the self and begin the journey inward. But most people resist this call because it's uncomfortable. It asks us to face parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. It challenges us to drop the roles we've spent years perfecting. It invites us into uncertainty. Yet this is the very path that leads to healing. Feeling lost isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's the first sign that something inside you refuses to live a life that's not yours. It's your deeper self saying, "There's more to you than this." The feeling of being lost, then, is not a failure. It's a whisper of your true self, asking to be found. Carl Jung taught that when we finally turn inward, when we begin to understand our fears, embrace our hidden parts, and reconnect with our essence, life starts to make sense again. The silence inside becomes peaceful rather than frightening. The confusion turns into curiosity. The emptiness becomes space for something real to grow. So if you feel lost right now, don't panic. Don't rush to fix it. Instead, listen, reflect, be still. This lostness may just be your soul beginning to wake up. We often go through life thinking we are just one person, a single unified self who acts, thinks, and feels with consistency. But Carl Jung believed that this idea is not only misleading, it's also the very reason many people feel confused and fragmented. According to Jung, the human mind is not a simple, singular identity. It is a complex inner world made up of many different parts, each with its own voice, purpose, and energy. And when we don't understand this inner complexity, we start feeling like we've lost control of our own lives. Jung's model of the psyche is a map of this inner world. At the surface, we have the conscious mind, the part of us that we're aware of every day. This includes our thoughts, decisions, identity, and the way we interact with the world. But beneath the conscious mind lies the unconscious, a vast and mysterious realm filled with memories, feelings, instincts, and aspects of ourselves we don't usually notice, or that we have even forgotten or denied. In the center of the conscious world is the ego, not in the modern sense of pride or arrogance, but rather as our sense of identity. The ego is the I that says, "This is who I am, this is what I believe, this is what I do." But the ego is only a small part of the whole psyche. Jung warned that if we identify too much with our ego, we become blind to the greater forces shaping our thoughts and behaviors. One of those forces is the persona, the social mask we wear in daily life. It helps us fit into society, maintain relationships, and protect our more vulnerable selves. We all play different roles: employee, parent, friend, student, leader. The problem arises when we start believing that these roles are all we are. Jung believed that becoming too attached to the persona leads to disconnection from the deeper self. We begin to live for others' approval and forget what we truly value or desire. Then there is the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche that contains everything we reject or deny about ourselves. These could be emotions like anger, jealousy, or sadness, traits like selfishness or insecurity, or even positive qualities that we were discouraged from expressing. The shadow lives in the unconscious, but it has power over our choices and reactions. When we're unaware of it, it can control us in subtle ways. But when we face it, we reclaim lost parts of ourselves. Jung also identified the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies present in all people, regardless of gender. The anima lives in the unconscious of men and represents emotion, intuition, and nurturing. The animus, present in the unconscious of women, symbolizes logic, structure, and assertiveness. These energies are essential for psychological balance. When they are repressed or unacknowledged, we experience emotional turmoil, relationship struggles, and even creative blocks. At the deepest level of the psyche lies what Jung called the self, not to be confused with the ego. The self is the totality of who we are, the union of conscious and unconscious, of light and shadow, of all inner opposites. It represents wholeness and inner harmony. When people feel lost, it's often because they've become too focused on the ego or persona and too disconnected from the self. Jung's vision of the psyche is like a house with many rooms. Most of us live only in the living room where things are tidy and well lit. But the rest of the house, the basement, the attic, the hidden doors, holds important pieces of who we are. If we don't explore those spaces, we remain strangers to ourselves. Life begins to feel flat or meaningless because we're only engaging with a small part of our inner truth. This is why Jung believed that inner conflict is not necessarily a sign of illness. It is a sign that there is more of you waiting to be discovered. The feeling of being pulled in different directions, of not knowing who you really are, is simply a reflection of the psyche trying to become whole. Each part of you has something valuable to offer, even the parts you dislike or ignore. Understanding Jung's model of the psyche helps us make peace with our contradictions. It shows us that it's normal to feel uncertain, to change, to carry opposing desires. The goal is not to eliminate these inner parts, but to learn how to integrate them. When we stop trying to force ourselves into a single, rigid identity, and instead embrace the richness of our inner world, we begin to move from fragmentation toward wholeness. So if you feel lost or overwhelmed by your own thoughts and emotions, remember this: you are not broken. You are complex. And that complexity, when understood and accepted, is the very thing that can lead you back to yourself. From the moment we step into society, we learn to wear masks. As children, we learn what pleases our parents. As students, we figure out what our teachers want from us. As adults, we continue this pattern, shaping ourselves to meet expectations, fit into roles, and belong. Carl Jung called this social mask the persona. It's the version of ourselves we show to the world. And while it helps us function, succeed, and be accepted, it can also become the very thing that distances us from who we truly are. The persona isn't evil or deceptive by itself. Jung acknowledged that we need it to survive in society. We can't go around expressing every raw emotion or personal thought. The persona acts like a filter, allowing us to interact with the external world in a socially acceptable way. For example, a doctor needs to act calm and confident even when uncertain. A teacher may have to show patience even when frustrated. These are necessary masks. The danger arises when we forget that we're wearing a mask at all. Over time, people often begin to believe they are their persona. We identify so strongly with our roles. I'm a manager, I'm a parent, I'm a success, I'm always strong, that we lose sight of the deeper, more authentic parts of ourselves. Jung warned that when the persona becomes too rigid or dominant, it starts suppressing the real self underneath. And this suppression is what leads to a quiet inner unease. This is one of the hidden causes behind the feeling of being lost. On the outside, you might appear to have it all together, but on the inside, something feels false or hollow. You're living in alignment with a character, not a soul. Jung said that the persona is a system of behavior developed in response to the demands of society. But those demands aren't always aligned with your truth. So when you perform too long for others, you begin to forget what you actually think, feel, or want. This conflict between the persona and the real self creates inner tension. You may find yourself saying yes when you want to say no, smiling when you feel exhausted, or pushing forward when all you want is to pause. Jung believed that this gap between the mask and the soul is where psychological suffering begins. The wider the gap, the more disconnected you feel. Anxiety, depression, even burnout can be symptoms of this divide. They are not just emotional struggles, but signals from within that something essential is being denied. One of the hardest truths about the persona is that it often works. People may admire you, reward you, and even love the mask you wear. But if that mask doesn't reflect your real self, the love and validation won't feel fulfilling. You'll feel unseen, even in the spotlight. Jung believed that real healing begins when we start peeling back that mask, not to destroy the persona, but to loosen its grip on us. This peeling process can be uncomfortable. It means questioning long-held beliefs about who you are. It means admitting that you're tired of pretending. It might even mean stepping away from roles or relationships that no longer feel aligned. But the reward is profound. You begin to reclaim the parts of yourself you've ignored. You start hearing your own voice again instead of the echo of expectations. To do this, Jung encouraged self-reflection. Journaling, therapy, solitude, and creative expression are tools that help you reconnect with your deeper identity. When you stop performing and start listening, you begin to sense the person behind the mask, the one who may be softer, more unsure, more vulnerable, but also more real. Jung did not advocate for discarding the persona entirely. That would be unrealistic and even dangerous in a social world. Instead, he emphasized balance. The persona should be flexible, like a well-fitting outfit, not a prison. It should serve the self, not hide it. When the mask becomes a conscious tool, not an unconscious identity, we begin to live with greater freedom. So if you find yourself feeling disconnected or unsure of who you really are, consider this. How much of your life is being lived through a mask? How often are you performing instead of expressing? And what parts of you have been waiting quietly behind that persona, hoping to be seen? Recognizing the persona is the first step toward healing the fragmented self. It is the moment when the actor steps off stage, takes a breath, and begins the journey inward, not toward perfection, but toward truth. Because behind the mask isn't weakness, it's your real power, your real story, your real life. Deep inside every human being lives a part of themselves they often try to forget. It holds the thoughts we don't want to think, the feelings we're ashamed of, and the urges we try to bury. Carl Jung called this part of the psyche the shadow, and he believed that ignoring it is one of the main reasons we feel fragmented, confused, or emotionally overwhelmed. The shadow isn't evil. It's not a monster. It's simply the collection of everything we've rejected, denied, or suppressed within ourselves. Imagine a box inside your mind, and every time you were told, "Don't say that," "That's not acceptable," or "You shouldn't feel this way," you put something in that box. Over time, it fills with anger, jealousy, fear, selfishness, vulnerability, and even positive qualities that were misunderstood or unwelcomed. Perhaps as a child you were too loud, too sensitive, too curious, and were taught to tone it down. Into the box it went. That box is your shadow, and the more you ignore it, the more power it gains. The shadow operates unconsciously. That's what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't ask for permission to show up. It leaks into your thoughts, reactions, and relationships without you even realizing it. You might suddenly lash out at someone you love, or sabotage your own success, or feel triggered by people who act in ways that secretly reflect your hidden traits. That's the shadow trying to be seen. Jung believed that whatever you repress doesn't disappear. It grows, and it will find ways to express itself, often in distorted or harmful forms. One of the clearest signs that your shadow is active is when you have strong emotional reactions to others. For example, if you absolutely cannot stand someone's arrogance, it might be because there's a repressed part of you that longs to feel confident but has always been told not to. If someone's emotional neediness makes you uncomfortable, it could be because you've buried your own need for connection. These reactions are mirrors. What we hate in others often reflects what we've disowned in ourselves. Jung believed that growth doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from facing your imperfections with honesty and compassion. The shadow isn't something to destroy. It's something to understand. When you shine a light on it, you begin to reclaim lost parts of your personality. These are not just negative traits. They're energies, instincts, and emotions that, once integrated, can bring strength, creativity, and depth to your life. Facing your shadow can be difficult. It requires courage to admit that you're not always kind, that you carry judgment, or that you envy others. It also means accepting that some of your thoughts are dark or uncomfortable. But Jung emphasized that the shadow is not your enemy. It is part of your human nature. To become whole, you must embrace the full range of who you are, not just the socially approved version. Ignoring the shadow doesn't make it disappear, it just drives it deeper, and from the depths it controls your behavior in ways you don't understand. This is why people often feel stuck in patterns, repeating the same mistakes, entering the same toxic relationships, or sabotaging themselves again and again. Jung would say, it's because the unconscious is running the show. Only when we make the unconscious conscious, he said, do we begin to change. Working with the shadow means being radically honest with yourself. It means noticing when your reactions are too strong, when your judgments feel personal, or when you avoid certain truths about yourself. It can be helpful to journal, to talk with a therapist, or simply to sit with your discomfort and ask, what am I not allowing myself to feel right now? Or what part of me am I refusing to see? Shadow work isn't about shame. It's about integration. When you reclaim the parts of yourself you've rejected, you become more real, more grounded, and more compassionate. You start to understand others better because you've seen your own darkness. And in doing so, you become less controlled by your emotions, less reactive, and more in tune with your true nature. Carl Jung believed that wholeness is not found in perfection, but in the ability to hold opposites, light and dark, joy and sorrow, strength and weakness. When you stop running from your shadow and start learning from it, you unlock a deeper kind of peace, a peace that comes from knowing and accepting all of who you are. So if you feel like something inside you is unsettled or unrecognized, don't turn away. That's your shadow speaking, and maybe, just maybe, it's not there to haunt you. It's there to heal you. Every human being carries within them both masculine and feminine psychological energies, regardless of their gender. Carl Jung called these inner forces the anima and animus, two powerful aspects of the unconscious that shape our thoughts, emotions, relationships, and sense of identity. When these inner energies are denied or left undeveloped, we begin to feel incomplete, emotionally imbalanced, or uncertain about our place in the world. And yet, most people go through life unaware of these inner presences, let alone how they influence their lives. Jung believed that the anima represents the feminine energy within a man's unconscious, while the animus is the masculine energy within a woman's unconscious. These are not literal gender roles. They are symbolic forces that live within us all. They affect how we relate to others, how we understand ourselves, and how we connect to meaning, creativity, and spiritual depth. When one side dominates or is ignored, a kind of inner war begins, a subtle emotional disorientation that leaves us feeling lost, confused, or stuck. Let's begin with the anima. In men, the anima may appear in dreams, fantasies, or emotional reactions. It often holds qualities like sensitivity, vulnerability, intuition, creativity, and emotional depth. But in many societies, men are taught to reject these qualities, to be tough, irrational, and emotionally restrained. Over time, the anima becomes repressed. As a result, men may lose touch with their inner life. They may struggle to express emotions, connect in relationships, or find deeper meaning beyond external success. A repressed anima doesn't disappear. Instead, she influences a man's outer relationships, particularly with women. He may idealize women or become overly dependent on them emotionally, or he might feel threatened by powerful, expressive women. These reactions aren't really about others. They're about the neglected anima within, crying out for recognition and integration. Now, let's consider the animus in women. The animus embodies qualities like assertiveness, logic, clarity, strength, and independence. But women, too, are often conditioned to suppress these traits, especially in cultures that expect them to be gentle, quiet, or self-sacrificing. When the animus is underdeveloped, a woman may doubt her decisions, feel voiceless, or look to others for validation. On the other hand, when the animus is inflated or distorted, it can lead to harsh inner criticism or cold, rigid thinking. A woman might become disconnected from her feelings or struggle with intimacy, not because she lacks emotional depth, but because her inner masculine is out of balance or wounded. Jung emphasized that both men and women must build a relationship with these inner figures, not by rejecting their gender identity, but by integrating the qualities they've denied. A man becomes more whole when he accepts his tenderness, listens to his intuition, and honors his need for emotional connection. A woman becomes more whole when she trusts her inner authority, sets boundaries, and expresses her voice. The anima and animus often first appear through projection. That is, we see in others what we haven't yet acknowledged in ourselves. For example, when someone falls in love and feels that the other person is everything they've ever wanted, Jung would say they're often seeing their own anima or animus projected onto that person. But no real human being can carry the weight of that projection forever. Eventually, disappointment sets in, not because the other person failed, but because we were actually looking for a part of ourselves. This is why so many relationships suffer. We don't realize that we're unconsciously expecting others to fulfill what's missing within us. Jung encouraged people to withdraw their projections and meet their inner anima or animus directly through dreams, creative work, therapy, meditation, or deep reflection. When we do this, we stop expecting others to complete us. We begin to complete ourselves. Balancing the anima and animus brings emotional depth, clarity, and confidence. We become more open, more stable, more capable of love, not just romantic love, but self-love and the ability to deeply connect with others. It also enhances our creativity, because the union of these inner forces gives rise to a more integrated, inspired mind. Ultimately, Jung believed that wholeness is not about becoming more like one side or the other. It's about balance. It's about honoring both strength and softness, action and reflection, reason and emotion. These are not opposites to be chosen between. They are partners meant to dance together within the soul. So if you often feel unsteady, confused, or incomplete, ask yourself, which parts of me have I been taught to reject? What qualities in others trigger strong feelings, positive or negative? These are clues. They point toward your anima or animus, toward the energies within you that are longing to be. There comes a moment in life when a person begins to question everything, not because they are weak, but because something deeper is waking up. This moment is often marked by confusion, a sense of inner conflict, or the feeling of being lost in a life that no longer fits. Carl Jung believed this experience signals the beginning of a sacred process, individuation. This is not just a psychological change. It is a transformation of the soul. Individuation is the journey of becoming whole by integrating every part of yourself, both conscious and unconscious. To understand individuation, you must first recognize that most people live only from a small portion of their psyche, the ego. The ego is the I that helps you make decisions, set goals, and move through everyday life. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies a vast unconscious realm, your shadow, your inner feminine or masculine, your forgotten desires, your suppressed fears, and your higher potential. Jung taught that we become whole not by staying in the comfort zone of the ego, but by courageously exploring the depths of the unconscious. This journey is not linear. It doesn't come with a clear map. It often begins when life disrupts your routine through loss, illness, heartbreak, aging, or deep dissatisfaction. These disruptions act as a call. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." The pain you feel is not random. It's a sign that something within you is asking to be seen. The true self, hidden beneath years of social conditioning and personal defenses, begins to stir. Individuation requires you to confront everything you've avoided. Your shadow, your fears, your masks, and your hidden longings. It means accepting your contradictions, being both strong and vulnerable, kind and angry, wise and unsure. It's not about perfection, it's about truth. The more parts of yourself you recognize and integrate, the closer you move toward wholeness. Jung compared this process to alchemy, turning base metal into gold. The raw emotions, flaws, and failures you carry are not burdens. They are ingredients for your transformation. One of the greatest challenges in individuation is letting go of the persona, the social mask you've worn for so long. You begin to realize that your job title, your roles, your achievements, even your personality are not the entirety of who you are. They are parts, not the whole. And while it's frightening to shed these layers, it's also liberating. You make room for your true self to emerge, not the self others expect, but the self that has been silently waiting within you. The shadow, too, plays a central role in individuation. You cannot become whole by clinging only to what is light and acceptable. Jung believed that facing the shadow, your darker traits, unacknowledged emotions, and repressed instincts is essential. By doing so, you reclaim energy that was previously used to hide or deny these parts. You become more real, more grounded, more fully alive. The anima and animus, your inner feminine and masculine energies, must also be integrated. This brings emotional balance, clarity, and creativity. As these energies find harmony, you stop projecting them onto others. You stop looking for someone to complete you and begin to feel complete within yourself. As individuation deepens, you start to experience moments of clarity and connection. You no longer feel at war with yourself. Decisions become clearer. Relationships become more authentic. You develop a deeper sense of purpose, not based on external success, but on inner alignment. Jung called this the emergence of the self, the total unified being that includes all parts of your personality. The self is not a destination. It is a center within you that begins to guide your life, once you have created space for it to emerge. But individuation is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong process. There will always be more to discover, more to heal, more to understand. Jung didn't promise ease. He promised meaning, and this meaning comes from knowing yourself deeply, honestly, and compassionately. In a world that constantly pushes you to fit in, to perform, and to conform, individuation asks you to return to yourself. It's a path for the brave, a path that requires solitude, reflection, and sometimes pain, but it also brings you something no external success ever can, the quiet power of being whole. So if you feel like you're falling apart, remember, maybe you're not falling apart. Maybe you're falling into yourself. Maybe you're shedding who you were never meant to be and beginning the sacred task of becoming who you truly are. This is individuation. This is the journey back home. At the core of Carl Jung's work lies a profound truth. Every human being is born with an inner blueprint, a deep design that guides us toward wholeness. This center of our being, which Jung called the self, is not the same as the ego. It is far greater, deeper, and more complete. While the ego is the part of us that manages daily life, making decisions, building identity, performing roles, the self is the totality of who we are, conscious and unconscious, known and unknown, light and shadow, and it is this self that holds the key to our true purpose, clarity, and inner peace. Most people, however, live disconnected from their self. From childhood, they are taught who they should be. They are rewarded for certain behaviors, punished for others. Over time, they build a persona, a mask designed to survive and succeed in society. And while that mask may win approval or protection, it comes at a cost. Slowly, the authentic self, the one who feels deeply, who dreams wildly, who questions, who creates, gets pushed deeper into the unconscious. In its place, a performance takes over. This is how many of us end up feeling lost, even when life appears fine on the surface. We wake up one day and realize that we don't recognize ourselves anymore. We've achieved what we were told we should, but it doesn't feel meaningful. We're surrounded by people, yet we feel unseen. This is not a sign of failure. It's a message from the self calling us back. Jung believed that this inner call, though often painful, is a sacred invitation to return to who we truly are. Reconnecting with the self isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering what was always there beneath the surface. The self contains your true values, your deep longings, your buried creativity, your quiet wisdom. It speaks not in loud commands, but in subtle feelings. What draws you, what drains you, what gives you peace without needing applause. To hear it, you must become still. You must pause the performance and listen. This journey inward is often resisted because it threatens the identity we've built. The ego fears losing control. The persona fears being exposed, but Jung reminded us, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The path to the self is not always comfortable. It asks you to face the parts of yourself you've denied, the anger, the sorrow, the envy, the need, but it also offers you back your passion, your playfulness, your strength, and your intuition. When you begin to reconnect with the self, your life shifts. You stop chasing empty goals and start seeking meaning. You choose relationships that nourish your soul instead of pleasing your image. You become less reactive, more reflective. You find joy not just in success, but in authenticity. And perhaps most importantly, you develop a new kind of trust, not in the world, but in yourself. You begin to feel rooted even when life is uncertain. This doesn't mean you abandon the outside world. Jung never said we should reject our roles or responsibilities. Instead, he encouraged us to live from the inside out. The self becomes the guide, and everything else, career, relationships, choices, flows from that center. You become aligned, and from that alignment comes a quiet kind of power. Not power over others, but the power to live truthfully, to walk your own path with integrity and grace. The more you live from the self, the less you need to wear masks. You become the same person alone and with others. Your words match your values. Your actions reflect your essence. This is not perfection. This is wholeness. And it is wholeness that brings peace, not because everything is solved, but because you are no longer at war with yourself. Jung believed that the journey to the self is the most important journey a person can take. It is not a retreat from life. It is the heart of life. It is where purpose is found, not in titles or achievements, but in being deeply, fully, and courageously yourself. So if you've been feeling lost, exhausted, or like something essential is missing, know this: the way forward is not out there, It is within. The self is waiting, not just to be discovered, but to be lived. You don't have to create it, you only have to remember it. And when you do, you'll realize that you were never really lost. You were just looking in the wrong direction. The path was always there, quiet, patient, and ready to lead you home.